All right, turn my headphones up. I'm feeling good today. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Behind the Counter BTC 2.0. I am your host, Rich. What's going on, everybody? Another fantastic week for comic books and comic book related properties, right? I think everybody could agree that we are living in an insane golden age of content, especially if you're a fan of comic books and, like I said, comic book related properties. The skies are blue once again in New York. The dreary grayness of wintertime looks like it's finally leaving us. And listen, it's reflective on my mood, and I hope you're in a good mood too, regardless of where you are. It's been over a month since I'm doing this new relaunch of Behind the Counter, and I'm feeling it. A lot of people are feeling it. I'm digging it. I can't wait to do this every week for you guys. So on to the meat of it. WandaVision, crazy stuff, right? Big reveal last week, and you saw what happened yesterday. Again, spoiler-free zone, but I want to hear what you guys think in the comments. I try not to keep it like super crazy and super like I don't want to give everything away. So let's talk about Superman and Lois Lane. The show just premiered on the CW earlier this week, and I really enjoyed it. But I'm going to also preface that by saying I have low to no expectations of anything superhero related that is live action, especially on television. I'm generally pleasantly surprised by walking into situations with low to no expectations with my comic book related stuff. And, you know, in life in general, low to no expectations is great. Standards are a different thing. High standards are fantastic, but expectations, sometimes they need to be on the lower side. Like I said, I walked into Lois and Clark, the new CW show, with the lowest of expectations. And I was very pleasantly surprised by what they did. It seemed like they took the backstory that was presented on Supergirl and the crossovers on the CW. They added a lot more to it. You have a bit of a flash forward in time. I want to say 14 years. I think the twins on the show were between 14 and 16. And stylistically, the show is probably the best looking superhero show that CW has put out. It looks gorgeous. I think they're consciously combining that Richard Donner feel with that modern Zack Snyder feel. Say what you want about the guy, but the dude can shoot a movie, and that aesthetic kind of comes across in the show. I'm not saying that Superman and Lois is ultra dark and angst ridden, but it is in a certain way. I really like the direction of it. It's kind of a new take on the Superman story. Again, no spoilers here, but I think if you guys enjoy watching this at least, and kind of know what to expect from television, or I should say have low to no expectations from your superhero stuff on television, you will be pleasantly surprised by this show. I really dig it. Again, it's not a knock on anybody. It's just a hard sell. I feel like I'm at that age where it's a hard sell to really like something that's on television, as far as like superhero stuff goes, and also like to spend my time on it. You know, like the older you get, the less time you have. It's weird. And you can take that as a metaphor, and you can take that literally as well. Pretty bananas. It's going to make you think today. It was also cool seeing the Fleischer Superman logo. That's the one spoiler I'll give you. It was cool seeing the Fleischer Superman logo / suit in one scene, which I really dug. And speaking of Superman, let's talk about this new Mezco Superman that came out this week. Jeez, what a figure. My brother Patrick turned me on to Mezco's a few years ago. As a gift, he had another Superman figure. He actually got me the exclusive Red Sun Mezco, Red Sun Superman. Awesome figure. Love it. It's still out of the box. It's on display. It's one of my favorite figures in my collection. I'm a huge Christopher Reeve Superman fan, and I could not resist ordering this figure while I was on vacation with my wife on the beach last year. It was a very COVID-friendly trip. We were literally like the only people at this resort out in Montauk. And one day my brother sends me an alert. I'm like, hey, you know what? I really do want this. Pre-ordered it. That was one of those ones where the Mezco website crashed a bunch of times. So I ended up getting it, and it shipped This week. I got it the other day. Open it up. This thing is beautiful. It's gorgeous. I'm gonna throw some pictures on here that I took for you guys. Check them out. My It's an amazing figure. Don't get me wrong. The tin is beautiful. Everything is awesome about it. It comes with the Fortress of Solitude crystals. My two minor gripes. One, the smiling head, a little wonky looking, and I wish the upper collar of Superman's costume was a little tighter to the figure's body. But you know what? That's it. We never had figures like this 20 years ago. We didn't even have figures like this 10 years ago. They were close to it, but nothing as detailed. Really good. I give this figure like a super A+. I got to figure out some kind of rating system for this show going forward. And again, I'm open to suggestions. If you want to hit me up with a rating system or what I should use or suggestions, please find me at BTC Rich on Twitter and let me know. DM me, message me, whatever you got to do. I'm all ears. I'm open to suggestions. And that brings me to my picks of the week. Let's talk comics. This week was a stacked week. It's been very stacked lately, which is fantastic. I say this on every episode. It's an embarrassment of riches if you're a comic book collector, comic book fan, or a fan of printed comic books or digital comics. Now, everything is so good. A lot of good standouts this week, but my two favorite books were Two Moons from Image, following it's a Civil War story. You don't really see many Civil War era comic books. It's a Civil War story following a character called Two Moons, who is a Civil War soldier in the Union of Native American descent. And I'm not going to give anything away, but it's worth picking up because it's such a cool book. You know, you don't really get many Civil War books, but you'll dig it. Hopefully, I'll either get one of the creators on the show very soon, hopefully. And my second pick of the week, which I think is my book of the week, is Nuclear Family #1 from Aftershock, from Stephanie Phillips and Tony Chastain, with J.D. Mettler and Troy Pateri. I hope I pronounce everybody's name right. Nuclear Family is a take on the Cold War scare that happened in America with a really fantastic twist ending. I'm not going to give anything away. I feel like this is one of those issue ones that, you know, this book had me hooked. From page one, it had me hooked. Dialogue, fantastic. Art, fantastic. Coloring, fantastic. Everything really, really stand out about this book. If you like kind of like a post-apocalyptic stories, almost like Fallout, but not really, it's hard to describe, but I think you guys will dig this book. Definitely my pick of the week. That being said, I think we're just going to go right into my guest for this week, Casey Goodwin. I met Casey a few years ago on the New York Comic-Con scene. He works for Dark Horse Comics, one of my favorite publishers. And we get to chatting about comic books, and this is an interesting one for you folks. We talk about paranormal investigation. Casey is a paranormal investigator. So we spend the majority of time talking about that, and it was super eye-opening, and I hope you guys dig it. All right, guys, I'd like to welcome Casey Goodwin, routing manager at Dark Horse Comics, to today's episode. Casey, how you doing, man?
Doing good, man. How are you?
I'm okay, man. We haven't seen each other in a couple of years. We became buds at New York Comic-Con like a couple of 3 years ago, maybe.
It was 2018, I think, was the first time I'd ever done the New York show.
Yeah, and then the year after that, 2019, I think I chewed your ear off the entire weekend.
Yeah, and it was great.
It was a lot of fun. I'm glad you feel that way. I get very what's the word? Self-conscious sometimes, because I'm like, oh, should I be talking to these people like as much as I am? You know, and then like I'll walk away for like a half an hour.
You know, luckily, coming from like a retail background, I'm really good at multitasking. So like I can hold a conversation and keep an eye on like so many different things at once. So it honestly didn't faze me once.
That's right on, dude. I appreciate that. So you've been working for Dark Horse for how long now?
I just hit I hit my 12-year. I say just, I guess it's time has like completely stopped for me since COVID. So last July just this last July I hit 12 years.
Wow. And and how did you end up there? 12 years is a long time, like working anywhere. So my hat's off to you.
Yeah. So basically the way it happened was I used to manage several different blockbusters. And I got to a point where the really higher ups started sending me to different some problem stores basically that needed to be fixed.
Mhm.
And at one point I ended up at this Blockbuster that was about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 miles from Dark Horse. And my boss was a customer at that Blockbuster. So we kind of, started kind of chatting and everything. And she told me, oh yeah, I work for a comic book publisher. And I was like, oh, cool. Which one? And she said Dark Horse. And I kind of lost it. I was like totally nerding out.
Mhm.
She started bringing me like, oh, here's a free comp of this hardcover Mignola book, or here's an art book from, who, I can't even remember the art book she gave me. I think it was a Frank Miller. It was a Sin City art book.
Mhm.
And then I found out that one of my employees was her daughter.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so, long story short, she basically was keeping an eye on me anytime she'd come in and rent, to see how I interacted with the customers, how I interacted with the employees. And then her daughter was giving her all this covert information on like, yeah, he's really good at this and blah, blah, blah. And so the job kind of started to open up for me. She was her previous employer was going to retire.
Okay.
So she needed somebody. She asked me if I wanted the job, and I said, yeah. And she's like, okay, the job's yours. Come in and interview. I'll give you a tour. I did that. And then she's like, okay, here's the caveat. You got to wait 6 months. It's like, oh, okay, I can do that.
Mhm.
And so I waited the 6 months, and then here I am now.
That's awesome. So they vetted you kind of secretly, and then kind of the honeypot was giving you free comics.
Totally. Yeah.
And you were a comic fan at the time, I'm assuming.
I was a big comic book fan when I was junior high, a little bit in high school, and then I kind of fell out of it. Got into a punk rock band, and started mingling with a bunch of people that thought comics and cartoons and stuff were pretty lame. So I veered off for a little while, but when I started with Dark Horse, it kind of reopened my my life to comics. And like the first thing I was exposed to obviously was Hellboy, and one of my personal favorites was The Goon by Eric Powell. And then here I am now.
Right on, man. And not only do you work at Dark Horse, you're in the comic book industry, but is it fair to say you have a side gig, or is it a passion project in OregonParanormal.com?
So Oregon Paranormal, I've actually been doing the paranormal research stuff for about 27 years, almost 28 years.
Wow. And you're 30, just on the record, you're 30 years old.
Oh, that's right. I am 30. I wish. No, when I lived in Southern California, I was a big fan of like In Search of and Unsolved Mysteries and things. So I kind of wanted to see if like there was anything to the stuff I was seeing on TV. So I kind of just started doing my own independent research, started picking up books by, actual smart people that, were professors at like Duke University and stuff. And they were like part of psychology departments and things like that. It wasn't, I guess for me, it wasn't like a ghost hunting thing. It was more like I wanted to find out, why people were experiencing these things, how these things were even possible. And seeing if there was any correlation that I could take like data that I was collecting and go, oh yeah, so this piece fits together with this piece, and this is why it's happening. And in the early days, didn't experience a damn thing, but it was enough to keep me going. And then I formed Oregon Paranormal with a buddy of mine up here back in 2009, and it kind of became its own beast. And again, here we are.
Has the pandemic affected that side of your life at all?
Big time. Yeah. We had, so back the first week of March last year, we put a statement out on our Facebook page and on our website that said, until we get the clear, we won't be doing any on-site case studies or anything like that. We can do consultations and things like that over the phone and through email. But as far as in-person consultations or even investigative work, we've completely sidelined it until it's safe for us to work with people and it's safe for our people to work with each other.
Right.
just trying to be as responsible as possible with it.
So what are what's the process? Like if I called you up and said, "Hey, I think X, Y, and Z is happening."
Yeah.
What do you do?
So the process would be, obviously it starts with either a phone call or an email.
Mm-hmm.
Then we take that information, we take it to our core team and look at it and say, is this something that we feel we want to pursue as opening up a case study? When I say case study, it's nothing like what you see on TV.
Mm-hmm.
A case study can last anywhere from 6 to 8 months to even longer. And because of that, or the reason for that is because, we're working with the clients. We've got to interview
Mm-hmm.
them. We've got to interview witnesses. Everything's done pretty meticulously. When we meet with a client for an interview, we have them on camera. We've got audio rolling, and we're trying to document as much of the interview as possible. One of the reasons we have them on camera is because, obviously we're taking all these notes and we're asking a lot of personal questions, a lot of like questions that pertain to, are you doing drugs? Do you consume alcohol? Are you on any prescription drugs that may alter your perception of reality?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any, psychological dysfunction within any members of your household?
Mm-hmm.
We want to try and kind of eliminate any physical or mental possibilities before we can even go down the unexplained route. And by videotaping it, it gives us the opportunity to take that information back to the office and really look at the video and see, were there any social cues that we missed? Were they blinking? Were they looking off camera? Were they scratching their, these nervous tics, like kind of like what a cop would do if they're interviewing a witness for like, a robbery or a murder or something. That way we can, figure out a different way to approach a question that they may have been uncomfortable with at that point in time during the interview. Once the whole interview process is done, we discuss, do we want to actually open a case study? Is there enough there to warrant a full-scale case study? Once we decide that, then we start figuring out a game plan. And, that entails, working with different types of contractors, electrical engineers and structural engineers. So we could bring them in first to look at, possible structural issues or electrical or plumbing. And then, we do geological surveys and things like that. Is there, are there underground streams? Is there, a quartz buildup? Because quartz puts off its own energy. And if there's enough of it, could that have anything to do with it? Is there construction? Are we dealing with something called infrasound, which are these super, super low frequency vibrations that we're not aware of sometimes? So like if you're dealing with a house and there's a windstorm, that windstorm causes vibrations within the home and can affect the human body. We're looking at like different things like barometers and things like that, because barometric pressure can alter somebody's blood pressure. But like low frequency, for example, makes the eyes twitch or vibrate at a very, very low frequency, which can cause things like hallucinations, people seeing shadow figures and things in the corner of their eyes. So it's just a really big process, and it's something that none of the TV shows ever cover.
That's fascinating, to be honest with you, because I think this is obviously the first time I've heard somebody in the paranormal field talk about it so candidly, as opposed to like your 20-minute TV episode where you're kind of just like, oh, I guess that's a ghost. They just go in like full steam.
Yeah, and they don't. There's no questioning of the data, and when you see the shows, they're always saying the word evidence.
Right.
And paranormal research has been around for 100+ years, and if there was like a lot of credible evidence, it would be out there right now. So basically what we're doing is we're just kind of discovering like different there's different corners of the paranormal, and one of the big ones is parapsychology, which studies the survival of consciousness after bodily death. So we're trying to figure out, is there some level of consciousness that for some reason lingers after bodily death? And then of course there's, the other fields where, there's the thrill seekers that just want to go out and re-experience something that they may have experienced in the past. Or they're just, they just want to collect, a dust orb or something and say, oh, that's Grandma Ethel. And she likes to hang out over by the air vent. Every time the air comes on, she shows up. And so there's so many things we have to look at.
So I got kind of two in one question for you.
Yeah.
So how many would you say, like, what's the ratio of people who turn around when you interview them and say, yes, I'm really hungover. I've been hungover for a week, and oh, I'm on crystal meth and I take LSD all the time, but I swear I saw something. And the people who you're like, you know what, let's pursue this.
There's been situations where, especially in the old days when we weren't so good at vetting our potential clients, where we would show up. I have a buddy who's also in this field that I work very closely with, and he was doing a case in Southern Oregon, and a lot of the things we have to ask about are there loaded weapons on the property and things like that. And during his investigation, they found a loaded shotgun it was like randomly placed by this wall. This wall was giving off a ridiculous amount of electromagnetic energy, which is basically radiation from unshielded wiring and lighting and things like that. And just about every piece of electronics puts off some level of electrical radiation. When it is on the high level, it's something that we need to look at. Well, it turns out that where the shotgun was, it was a false wall, and behind the false wall was this huge grow operation.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it can be interesting when you run into people that don't tell you first off during the initial interview process that, yeah, I saw that shadow figure, but I was tripping balls, or I was super high at the time. So those are things we have to keep in consideration. But then there's also, there have been studies that say some people that, that smoke weed, for example, can drop that weird veil that we have up. That's kind of like a wall that closes off, paranormal events to some people.
Okay.
And when they're high, it kind of, I don't know, it thins out that wall, and sometimes things break through.
Okay.
So there have been studies where we know of, like, researchers that have, taken the bullet to get high to forward the research. But what the nice part about that is we're obviously running different types of equipment,
right,
when those kind of events are taking place. But yeah, it's a fun but very, very boring. I mean, it's like watching paint dry while doing your taxes.
Oh boy.
They're like almost 100% of the time nothing happens.
Right.
But then you have that one thing that happens that's a head scratching. You have to really kind of examine it and go, okay, did I really experience that? And that's what kind of keeps us going.
So like, let's say like the 1 out of 20, that keeps you wanting more.
Yeah. I mean, I had an experience about 10 or 11 years ago that to this day, I'm still questioning my sanity on whether or not I experienced it. But the beautiful part was every piece of equipment that I had registered some weird environmental change that tells me something happened. So what it happened? Was, I don't know. I can't definitively say it was unexplained or paranormal. But it's something that keeps us going. It's that needle in the haystack that we're always looking for. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's keeping me going if I've been doing it for as long as I have.
Yeah. Is Oregon like a hotbed for paranormal activity?
I wouldn't say it's any more of a hotbed than, say the East Coast or whatnot. I think that historical events have a lot to do with it. Like just the emotion that goes into, like for example, obviously the East Coast has a lot more Civil War history and things like that, and a lot of tragedy. So paranormal events there make sense because there's so much energy that's being released during those events. And the same goes for the West Coast. I mean, you had everybody coming over in the Oregon Trail to discover this new land.
Mhm.
And you also had like the gold rush in California and everything. And you know, the emotion of people leaving, you know, their home in the Midwest or on the East Coast to find gold on the West Coast, only to die of dysentery.
Mhm.
I mean, there's infinite possibilities of why paranormal events happen. It's just we're
Uh-huh.
trying to figure out what that catalyst is that feeds these events.
Well, you also kind of touched, which again, it's something I've never heard before, just going by the paranormal stuff that's on TV, but you kind of touched on a little bit of a philosophy of like bringing that veil down that
Yeah.
people kind of have up. So, like, what led you to incorporate that aspect of it, that kind of philosophy into what you're doing? Because what you're doing is basically like hard research, like you said, you know, like you equated it to paint drying while doing your taxes.
Yeah. So in relation to the veil dropping,
Mhm.
and I haven't told this story to a lot of people. I had across the street from us is a neighbor's house, and his roommate at the time decided to commit suicide,
Mm.
and I heard it happening. It was
Oh
actually
no.
I was doing some dishes. It was about 10 or 11 o'clock at night,
Mhm.
and I didn't really think anything of it. And so what it was they've got this bathroom window above the front door on the second
Mhm.
story that's always usually open. And I had assumed, oh, someone over there's like just heaving, they're just getting sick, and just hearing
Mhm.
somebody throw up and cough and everything.
Yeah.
What I was actually hearing was the guy choking on a rope.
Oh boy.
And that's not something you ever forget.
Right.
Fast forward, I want to say this was about maybe 3 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, I was dealing with some neck issues from probably the Dark Horse gig, and you know, just having crappy posture at my desk.
Uh,
And so a buddy of mine, he runs a weed shop, and he's like, "Here, you know, try these CBD. It's a 1-to-1 CBD edible.
mhm.
It does have a psychoactive effect." And so what happened was my wife and I, you know, this happens in the summertime. We sit on the front porch and we'll, you know, just chat.
Mhm.
It's nice and warm out there and everything. And one day I had taken two of the edibles, and we're just kind of sitting there talking.
Mhm.
And I mentioned, I was like, "Oh, gee, so and so must be getting sick." And she's like, "What are you talking about? They're not even home."
Mhm.
And I said, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, they're gone for the weekend." And the house next to us, nobody was home. Then it dawned on me what I was hearing was the exact same gurgling, choking, coughing noises that I heard the night that he actually completed suicide. So the questions in my mind, even though I was slightly altered, I went into this investigative mode. And I've got surveillance cameras
Mhm.
on, you know, my front porch, so you can see me stop my conversation with my wife, and I'm just kind of doing this, listening. And I'm looking at my watch. I'm making note of the date and the time.
Mhm.
And I ended up backing up the file from our surveillance camera just so I had it. And what I ended up figuring out, I had to go through and refigure out, okay, what was the date? What was the year that he committed suicide and all that
Mhm.
stuff? It was September 26th. It was 8 o'clock at night. So we were within days of the actual event happening. So the tough part is trying to figure out, was the edible triggering a memory in my head,
Uh-huh.
or was I experiencing something because that veil was dropped?
Mhm.
And so the TV shows would refer to that as like a residual haunting. In the parapsychological field, we would just refer to that as a haunting. It's just something that plays over and over again based on a date or a significant event
Mhm.
or a time. And what I believe I was experiencing was kind of a experience of that haunting. Doesn't mean his consciousness is still there. I was just experiencing that past event, or I was just tripping balls, and it was just a memory replaying in my head. It hasn't happened since. Oh,
I couldn't hear what you said.
I hate activating Siri every once in a while. But yeah, so I mean, again, it's a head scratcher because it's not something I've experienced since then. And that is also something that's triggered a lot of these different research projects, throughout the nation when it comes to, marijuana and the paranormal.
So that's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that story. Now, if I have like a couple of things I want to mention about like almost like the psychology of, let's say, like a haunting or an experience or something like that. Like I'm of the firm mindset that, let's go to like biblical times. I feel like there's a good argument for the folks that say they saw this stuff may not have been on any kind of psychotropic drug, but it just may have been like you're more connected to some kind of ether because there's no pollution, everything's still natural, you're not dealing with the stresses of like a modern world,
Right.
Do you think that may go ahead?
That could very well be, but another avenue is that human perception can be very skewed, especially in those type of situations where you're put into a situation where you're observing an event, and it's an event that shouldn't be happening. So it's kind of like I use the analogy of like, you're working a retail job and someone comes in and holds up your store. So now you're trying to remember all of the events that happened during the robbery as you're giving it to the police.
Okay.
But then a couple weeks down the road, you're trying to explain the events again to the cop, and you go, wait a minute, that's not how it happened. So the adrenaline that's flowing at that time dissipates, and now you're starting to think a little clearer. So a lot of times what we do is we'll tell somebody, okay, you have an event, log it, write it down in a journal, write down, the date and the time that it happened. What was going on before the event? What happened after the event? What was the duration of the event? Was there construction going on outside? Was there weather happening at the same time? Were there other witnesses? And then another thing we'll do is we'll have them write down the experience and put it in an envelope. Have them seal the envelope and hold on to it for about a month. And then have them open the envelope, read what they wrote. And then it's funny because you watch them as they're reading going like, that didn't happen that way. So it's really tough because, I run into a lot of people that say, oh, the human brain is my best tool when, I'm investigating the paranormal. That's not true. Because if anybody's seen the TV show Brain Games, I don't care how analytical or how like, I mean, looking at something and trying to analyze, especially on like Brain Games, I always get fooled by the stupidest illusions.
Right.
So it's very difficult to say that human brain is the most powerful tool. Yeah, it is a powerful tool, but sometimes it works with us and other times it works against us. And a lot of the time it works against us when we're talking about paranormal events, because people tend to interject their own version of events that don't tend to coincide. And that's a lot of the reason why we record the interview process and everything.
That's fascinating. So let's say in the last few years, has there been anything like really memorable where you were like, listen, that I think that there's something going on here, either with a person or with an event,
Yeah. We did an investigation about 7 or 8 years ago in a little town just, I want to say a little west of Salem. And the initial phone call was just like, they were basically saying, this is happening and that is happening. And everything that they were saying was like, oh, wow, this is too good to be true, because everything they're reporting are like the holy grails of paranormal research.
Okay. Which are, I'm going to interrupt you right there. You have to tell me the holy grails of paranormal research. I
The
need to
holy
know this thing.
grails are anything that happens in real time
Okay.
that you're experiencing and witnessing without the use of electronic devices.
Okay.
Because a lot of times you watch TV shows and they're talk about EVP, which stands for electronic voice phenomena.
Mhm.
And that's when supposedly a voice that you didn't hear during the initial questioning imprints itself somehow on a digital device or a piece of magnetic tape.
Mhm.
Um, it's something that we refer to as disembodied voice, is something that you can hear, and then in some cases you can actually like visualize something. Um, so we show up at the house, we're doing the interview. We're all, and the family was great. They cooked us dinner. So we're having dinner, we're recording the interview, and it's just the husband and wife, and then me and my co-founder, Scott Riedel, and we're conducting this interview.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, we're hearing somebody pacing upstairs,
Wow.
and it's very discernible when you're hearing somebody walk upstairs versus hearing an old building creak.
Right. Right.
And then it's another story when you hear a door slam while you're trying to conduct an interview and stay composed,
Mhm.
because the minute we heard the footsteps and the door close, we wanted to jump up and run upstairs and start investigating, but we knew we couldn't.
Right. Right.
Um, we get back to the office and we're going through the video and we're going through the audio, and all of a sudden we're listening to the imprint of this little girl's voice. She keeps saying, "Excuse me, please." She was trying to interject while we're all talking,
Mhm.
and her voice popped up several times in this interview audio footage or audio file. And that was kind of the catalyst. It was like, okay, there's something going. We knew for a fact at that point that there was something going on. We just didn't know to what level. And to this day, that's one of the most active cases we've ever worked. I mean, it was just everything was happening. I mean, we would ask for a response. Next thing you know, we'd hear footsteps in the kitchen and what sounded like the rustling of clothing.
Wow.
And we were registering environmental changes, anywhere from significant fluctuations in the electromagnetic field,
Mhm.
but also dips and spikes in the ambient temperature within a specific room. And those things, there's obviously some room for error, like
Mhm.
a 0.3 or a 0.4 on EMF, because we've got to account for, Wi-Fi and all of that, and different radio signals and everything. But when it
Mhm.
jumps from like 1.0, which was like a base reading for the house, to like a 10,
Mhm.
that's rare. That's very rare. Um, and the same goes for temperature fluctuations. There shouldn't be a 25-degree temperature change within a second and then level back out again. So those are things that we have to look out for, that tell us there's something going on here that we don't quite know a reason for yet.
That's fascinating. It seems like you really have to think of everything when it
Yeah.
comes to this.
Yeah, and when we don't, and when we can't think of everything, we have to reach out to people that have that are more versed in a specific discipline, whether it's audio engineering or
Mhm.
visual work, or like I said, with electrical engineering and plumbing and construction, and
Mhm.
trying to get as many experts outside of the paranormal field to look at this data that we're collecting to say, hey, what the hell is this that we're looking at? Um, it really helps, and two, it's also peer review
Mhm.
is a really big thing. I mean, scientists do peer review, and medical professionals do peer review. Well, why shouldn't we?
Yeah.
So
So would you say like these anomalies or the stuff you're investigating, could they happen anywhere at any time, or do you find that it's more, I hate to use like the term kind of like in an old established place, you know what I mean? Like,
right,
is it the new apartment building that went up, or is it like the rickety house that's 250 years old that somebody built with their two hands?
honestly, it can happen anywhere, and I think that um One, it's tied to, and I like to use the Dawn of the Dead analogy.
Uh,
Where do people go when they die? Well, they go to their favorite haunts, and the Dawn of the Dead people, they ended up going to the mall and
right,
hanging
right.
out, looking for food, looking for brains. And I kind of feel like that's the same situation with, certain entities. They go back to places that brought them joy or comfort. And that's why I think it's funny that I see ghost hunting teams going and investigating cemeteries.
Mhm.
And it's like, why would I want to go and haunt my body in a cemetery? It just doesn't track with me. Um, but then when it comes to like specific buildings, I think another good analogy would be looking at poltergeist. The
Mhm.
houses were built over a cemetery. They've never moved the bodies.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, you're asking for trouble in that perspective. But then you're looking at historical events. Did something happen on that particular plot of land before a tract housing development went up? Um, Sometimes you can go down a historical rabbit hole where you find out that there's absolutely the history has absolutely nothing to do with what's going on.
Mhm.
But then in other aspects, sometimes the history does help paint a picture of what it is we may be investigating.
That's very interesting that you mentioned that too, because I also think like with from the psychological aspect, you kind of don't want to get caught up in and it's haunted by so and so's ghost. I feel like that
Right.
I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. So like earlier in the year, my wife and I took a trip to Mystic, Connecticut, and we did a historical graveyard tour. And it
Uh-huh.
was very educational,
Yeah.
where, these people who had the wealthier families who had the prime spots of land in the cemetery would make it like their entire Sunday,
Oh
where,
yeah.
they'd go have lunch, talk to the person who's buried there, and then go home. So like after
Hmm.
this whole thing, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Everything's haunted. This is great. I feel like you definitely have to like talk yourself out of like this is something.
Yeah. It's really important to stay grounded. You have to look at any case we look at. We have to be completely unbiased.
Mhm.
Um, we have to look at everything that they're telling us, whether or not we believe it or not at that point in time. We have to look at it as critically as we can, and then take information as we're peeling back the layers of the case. Figure out, okay, yeah, this is what we need here. This we can toss out, and
Mhm.
we're working on a documentary now where we're dealing with a 110-year-old building.
Wow.
It was originally built as the general hospital for this lumber community.
Mhm.
And then it became a pain clinic, and it was a brothel. And now, as it stands today, it's a hotel. So we have to look, we're digging through all the past records. We've got an Excel spreadsheet that's like 30 or 40 pages long that lists all the people that were treated at the general hospital for being crushed to death by logs or buried
Wow.
alive because of cave-ins,
Mhm.
or they drowned in the bay, or there were suicides by like strychnine or gunshot wounds. And we got to
Wow.
figure out, like, are any of these deaths tied to the building, or are they just deaths that were recorded by the attending physician at the time, even though that person never actually made it to the hospital? And then we have to take all the information that we're getting from the individual guest books within each room. And
Mhm.
it's interesting because you look at the first page, and the first page goes, "Oh man, I love this place. It's the warmest, most inviting hotel." But
Mhm.
there's something off, and I experienced this last night, and blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden, all the subsequent guest book entries after that have to do with hauntings. So, did those people after that person experience what they really experienced, or are they letting their mind get the better of them because of what they've read on the internet or what they've read
Mhm.
in past guest book entries? So, and there's a lot of false claims at this place that we're investigating. So it's a lot of it. It's
Mhm.
clearing up a lot of the bogus information that was drummed up by previous owners of the business to drum up business for the business.
Wow, there is really a lot. I'm flabbergasted by the amount of research and work that goes into this stuff. So how did you say you've been doing this for over 20 years? 27 years, right?
Yeah, a little over 27 now.
So how did you get into this as like a young man?
So it all goes back to In Search of and Unsolved Mysteries,
Hmm.
and that curiosity spark. And I found myself at this yard sale in my neighborhood,
Hmm.
and on this blanket were a bunch of books, and there were two books that caught my eye. One was ESP's Hauntings and Poltergeist, written. It's called a Parapsychologist's Handbook, written by Lloyd Auerbach,
Hmm.
who became really big in the paranormal field in about 1984, shortly after Ghostbusters came out. It was like there was a big paranormal boom after that movie came out,
Right.
and he started getting notoriety and started showing up on TV shows like Sightings and Unsolved Mysteries and
Hmm.
such. And then there was another book called The Poltergeist, written by Dr. William James Rawle, who was just a regular psychologist and
Hmm.
professor at Duke University. And he started poltergeist research back in the 50s and coined a term called RSPK, which is recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis.
Okay.
Because the term poltergeist, it's German, and it
Hmm.
refers to noisy ghosts. But what people don't understand is that poltergeist phenomena has nothing to do with ghosts and has everything to do with PK phenomena,
Okay.
which is another form of study in parapsychology that studies the human mind. And it's like Carrie or the movie
Hmm.
Firestarter. Those
Okay.
are different types of PK things where people can move things with their mind.
Hmm.
There's a very famous case from Tennessee. It was about this poltergeist that was tormenting this family on
Hmm.
this farmhouse, in this farmhouse. And it's the only documented case in the US of the paranormal killing somebody.
Oh wow.
And God, I wish I could remember. It's such a big case too. I
And
haven't
how
thought
how
about
long
that in
ago? How long
years.
ago was this?
This was I want to say 1800s.
Okay.
And oh, the Bell Witch.
Okay.
Yeah, if you ever have an inkling to look into it, check it out. They did a movie called American Haunting, which I think John Bell, who's the father, the patriarch of the family, was played by oh, Donald Sutherland.
Okay.
Not as accurate to the documented claims or
Hmm.
whatnot, but it basically was about this daughter who had been abused by her father, and they suspect that she was actually the one who was manifesting this poltergeist activity
Wow.
because of the just the raw emotions she was carrying with her. Um, and there's a famous president, and he admit I don't know if it was Madison or not, but he basically said, "I'd rather fight the entire British army than spend one more night at the Bell
Oh
farm."
wow.
So a lot of people experienced
Mhm.
something. But yeah,
And
for some reason they called it the Bell Witch because there was a lady who was supposedly a witch who was trying to get her land back or something crazy like that, and she cast a spell on them and all that. But it's just a fascinating field of study.
mhm. And then so like all that, like the Bell Witch sightings, all these books like got you into it at like a young age.
Yeah, yeah, and it was a curiosity. It wasn't because I experienced something and I wanted to
Mhm.
re-experience it. I just wanted to see if there was anything to what I was reading
Mhm.
and seeing on TV.
So what does a paranormal investigator do when there's a global pandemic?
They wait for the CDC to say that everything's clear and you can go back to work.
Well, I noticed you are wearing a Star Trek shirt.
Yeah, I've discovered quite a few new TV shows in my life in isolation.
Yeah.
So like every Saturday, my wife and I, we have a date night and we watch. I don't know if do you know who Svengoolie is?
Yes, I know who Svengoolie is.
Yeah. So we watch Svengoolie every night or every
Uh,
Saturday night. We watch the old black and whites and everything. And after Svengoolie, it's like a sci-fi Saturday. So it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica and all that stuff. I've never been a Star Trek fan.
yeah.
Couldn't stand it. I didn't understand it.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Like all of it.
I've always been in the Star Wars camp, and now I can say I get it. I totally understand Star Trek to a
That's
point where I
awesome.
appreciate it more so than Star Wars because of all the science that they inject into the series. Like the
Mhm.
writers did their research.
They did, and I'm glad you mentioned Star Trek. I'm a huge Star Trek guy, but
Yeah.
you've worked God knows how many comic book conventions like while you've been
Yes.
working for Dark Horse, right? So like
Quite a few.
yeah, so like at least like a couple hundred maybe at this point, maybe more.
Oh man, I wish not that many. I
Yeah.
officially started traveling with Dark Horse to shows. I want to say in 2017 was my first official show with the company,
Okay.
and that was San Diego. And then after San Diego, I think it was New York, and then the following year it branched out to C2E2,
Okay.
and then San Diego. So and ECC. So they kind of reserve me for the really big shows.
Mhm.
But I've seen
You're like
so
the
many.
headliner of the bigger shows.
I'm really good at line management.
So you've done a ton of these, right? So like
Yeah.
not being a Star Trek fan, when you saw people in cosplay before you found your love for Star Trek, would you just be like, get the F out of here? I don't know
It was just like, and
what.
I kind of feel the same way about Star Wars too. Like,
Mhm.
I see Star Wars cosplay and it's like, it's cool for a while, but then it's
Uh,
just like old hat and you just get tired of it after a while.
but now you're
And
into Star Trek. Are you gonna?
yeah,
You're like, you know what? I kind of want to get that Captain Picard hoodie. That's the red
we'll
and
see.
black.
And see, that's the thing. I
Yeah.
haven't quite got on board with the other Star Trek shows yet. And I've tried
Your
getting into,
original series.
oh yeah.
Okay. Talk to me about
So
that.
So much so that I've rewatched all 3 seasons probably like 9 or 10 times since last March.
Ooh, what's your favorite so far? Because I really want to hear about this. I am again a huge Star Trek fan.
Okay, so let me start with the show that hooked me.
Okay.
So after we were watching Svengoolie, that show ended. The new show came on,
Mhm.
and it was Paradise Syndrome.
Mhm.
It was the episode where Kirk ends up on that one planet, and it's all the Native Americans.
It's Key Rock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but no. I don't think it was the Key Rock one. It was the one where there was a big asteroid headed towards the planet,
Okay.
and it had that planetary defense system that was down.
Right.
But what hooked me was when Spock and McCoy are on the planet and
Mhm.
Kirk has disappeared. They don't know where the hell he is,
Mhm.
but they've got this window of time where they have to get to the deflection point of the asteroid in order to save the planet so that they could come back to get Kirk later.
Okay.
And it's basically Spock explaining to McCoy why having to explain it has just eaten up a good 10 minutes of time,
Mhm.
and they've lost all of this time to be able to deflect this thing. So when they interjected all that science just into that little conversation, I think it was like a 5 or 6 minute conversation of Spock having to mansplain to McCoy why it was important to get to this asteroid,
Uh,
I was hooked. But like, I don't know, some of my favorite episodes, the Menagerie Part 1 and 2, where Spock has to
phenomenal.
get Pike back to Talos,
Yeah.
and the Medusans episode,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
everybody wants to know what the Medusans look like, but obviously you can't because you go mad if you're human. The
Original
Doomsday
Checkmate.
Machine.
Yes. So like those episodes are phenomenal. I think if you check them out on Netflix, they're upscaled to like
Yes.
a more modern standard, which is beautiful. And they did that with Next Generation. I think Next Generation should be and are you watching these with your wife?
Every once in a while she'll sit in on some. She's seen them before. She's not quite as a ridiculous follower as I am now. But I did when I discovered the show, it was the Netflix, the 50th anniversary reintroduction with the new special effects and the new coloring and the upscale and all that stuff.
Looks so good.
This is everything George Lucas should have done with the original 3 Star Wars movies.
I agree.
He should have done minimal fixes and gone the Star Trek route. And I think a lot of people would have been a little happier with the changes.
Just make them look extra crisp. as opposed to the added CGI nonsense.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
bad. So
Yeah.
bad. Yeah.
So uh I think when you decide to pull the trigger on Next Generation, you're gonna be pleasantly surprised.
I'm trying to get past the 90s vibe because I'm not a big fan of 90s television.
Okay. It's tough.
Um
It's tough.
it's very tough because a
It's
lot
tough.
of it's like you go back and you watch like 80s TV shows
Mm,
and a lot of like Cheers, for example. It
yep.
holds up.
Absolutely.
Um
Absolutely.
but there's a lot of 90s stuff that just doesn't hold up.
Ne-
But I do want to give Next Generation a try. I did,
yeah.
and I'm not. I did cheat a little bit, and I kind of went through episodes like when McCoy showed up
Sure. Oh
and
yeah.
when Spock showed up. So I did cheat a bit. But yeah, I do need to. I need to get into that. I know I need to get into Deep Space Nine and
Mm,
like all the other iterations, including the new stuff that's got Spock apparently and Christopher Pike.
yeah. Yeah.
So I am looking forward to digging in at some point.
I'm very happy for you in that regard.
Yeah.
Like I've always been like a Trek guy. I love Next Generation. My wife, not so much. She never really gave a shit about Star Trek at
Yeah.
all. And then I was like, hey, listen, like, you want to do this? Let's watch Next Generation. We don't
Yeah.
have to do it from the beginning because they're kind of much like original series Trek. Like the episodes can be very self-contained. And
Big time.
then,
Yeah.
yeah. And then maybe after 3 or 4 episodes, she's like, you know what? I get it. This is amazing. Let's keep going. And I think at this point, we pretty much watch like every season. And
Nice.
Deep Space Nine is a little tougher because it's linear.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it's like a couple of my buddies like will text me Deep Space Nine quotes, because it's like it gets like really intense,
Mhm.
So I think as a Trek fan, it's something to shoot for. Voyager, not so much. But again, I love your shirt, dude.
Dude, I never thought in a
Mm,
million years I would be wearing a Star Trek shirt. But yeah, the further into my Trek obsession got, the more I realized like,
mm.
oh my God, I love Spock. He's just I don't like pilot episode Spock.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah.
And maybe
Yeah.
the first 4 or 5 episodes of Spock are really hard because he's
Yeah.
obviously still trying to figure out how to play the character. But
He's kind of a
yeah,
jag.
man, it's so good. And
Yeah.
a lot of people give the acting. They obviously they
Mhm.
give Shatner a lot of crap for his
Yeah.
acting, but the writing on that show is solid. The
Top notch,
dialogue is
man.
great. The science. I mean, I get why Neil deGrasse Tyson praises Star Trek and hates Star Wars now. I totally understand.
Yeah, from like that analytical mindset, absolutely. There is that, like, who knows if it's true or not, but they say that Gene Roddenberry was a note taker, I believe, for Eisenhower or one of the presidents way before Star Trek happened, and that all this stuff is stuff that he recorded from this meeting with the extraterrestrials at the Oval Office or wherever the hell it was.
That would be pretty rad. And see, that's
Mm,
another thing too,
mm,
and that would kind of track, working with the president or
mm.
any kind of military background because of the procedural stuff that you see on the
Right,
show. Also,
right,
like
right.
every extra has a job that they're performing that
Mhm.
has to do with some sort of function on that ship, which I really appreciate.
Right. It's not just somebody going, hit that button, let's do it, kind of like
Yeah,
your
yeah.
your sci-fi adventure. It's a very much like it's like a floating office building almost.
Yeah, when his yeoman comes and says, "I need
Mhm.
you to sign off on this fuel report." Of course, yeah, that
Yeah.
totally makes sense, and it's something, and I think that's where I find a disconnect with a lot of shows nowadays
Mhm.
is that, um, there's the detail oriented. It's like they've dumbed down TV and movies
Mhm.
for us because they don't feel like we need all that background stuff. And
Right.
sometimes I think we can lose a bit of it, but I think injecting some of that procedural stuff helps with story and characters just as
Absolutely.
much as the dialogue and I don't know. It's just something I really appreciate on the older shows.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're 100% right. I think today I was talking about like it's the difference between watching the Shield on it, like the FX show, not the Marvel show,
Yeah.
which is like pretty much like an action based dirty cop show
Right.
versus like watching the Wire, which is another phenomenal cop show, but there's so much procedural stuff in it.
Yes.
Like you're seeing McNulty do paperwork, and as opposed to like you're not seeing Vic Mackey do paperwork or anything like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, dude, I'm enjoying your newfound love of Star Trek right now. So let's see. I've known you for a couple of years. I think out of everybody I've ever met, you may be the biggest He-Man fan I know.
Dude.
I see it.
Like and I've got like He-Man stuff up here. I've got like artwork hanging, and yeah, I was lucky enough when we did the Art of He-Man book, everybody at the office knew that I was like the biggest fan at the office of He-Man. So they kind of brought me into the project, and I got to consult here and there, got to dig through boxes and boxes of Filmation cells and layout pages. And
did you pocket one or two?
Actually, what was great was the project leader said, yeah, this is all for sale.
Wow.
So I ended up purchasing like, I don't know, 15 pieces of artwork from the original show. And yeah, and then so the Origins line just kicked off back in, I want to say October, November. So I've been like feverishly collecting them ever since. So now I've just finalized wave 1, 2, and 3. I'm just waiting for wave 4 to be released. I have a problem.
I don't think it's a problem. I mean, like, listen, there's a reason why He-Man, I feel like, will never go away.
He won't. I it's funny because you look back at like the early 2000s before the new series came out, and you couldn't find anything. There was barely, I think there was a website called He-Man Ate My Balls on the website, and it was just all these just joke strips of screenshots from the original series, but there wasn't like an official, like I don't think He-Man.org was up yet. Mattel didn't have anything on their website about He-Man anymore. You couldn't find VHS or DVDs unless it was like a bootleg, but now it's everywhere. And now we're getting a new movie. And Kevin Smith's got the new TV show or the new cartoon coming out that takes place after the 3rd season of the original series.
Oh, wow.
And the voice cast is incredible.
I'm excited for that, man.
It's great. And yeah, I mean, anything He-Man I'm on board with, except for the version that replaced my Filmation version, which was He-Man in Space. And the new He-Man had like a lisp and a rat tail.
Yeah.
As
no, it was bueno. Bizarre. I remember that being like very bizarre. And like, it just didn't work. Were you a fan of the Four Horsemen figures? Because I remember when those came out, like nobody could find them.
Yeah, I've got them all. They're all boxed up. The only thing I didn't buy was Grayskull because I wasn't too keen on the sculpt for it.
Okay.
But yeah, I've got all of the Four Horsemen stuff. I've got all of the classics line that they released.
Oh, right on.
I've got 2 Castle Grayskulls on order right now that should be here in the next few weeks.
The new ones.
Yeah.
Though dude, that thing, I gotta when I post this, I'm gonna put a little graphic up. That thing is ridiculous.
Oh my God. So it's killing me because Canada's got it now. Like I'm in a bunch of different groups on Facebook, and they're posting pictures of them with the box, and there's been a couple unboxing videos, and it looks so nice. Like they meticulously painted some of the detail on the drawbridge. They reproduced a lot of the stickers that went on the computer and on the floor, and the tapestries are actually fabric tapestries now instead of stickers. So I'm going to open one and I'm going to keep one boxed. But I'll have them both on display.
How hard are you going to play with that when you open it?
It's crazy to think like I'm 41, it's 2021, and I'm still I can go into a Target and walk down an aisle and there's just He-Man stuff hanging on the pegs.
It's cool. Yeah.
It is so cool.
It's fun also, like just going into like any comic book store and kind of seeing stuff from your youth and being like, oh, they did a really nice job on this
Yeah.
figure. You know, like
Yeah.
the Super 7 stuff, I feel like a lot of times it's hit or miss, but they've been kind of nailing it with like the retro stuff. Like I ended up picking up a couple of Thundercats from that Thundercat line, and they're so good, man.
Yeah. Have you seen the new Thundercat vehicle that Super 7 just launched?
I've seen it. I don't want to spend $450 on it.
Yeah. Yeah. See,
Yeah.
that's the worst part is that, you know, it's great that a lot of this is coming out, but
Yeah.
some of it is like out of the reach of some of the diehard collectors
Absolutely. I mean,
because of the price point.
yeah. It's a little nuts, but at the same time, like I don't I think I feel like we've had this conversation like on the Comic-Con show floor where it's like we are the demographic.
Mhm.
Like guys who are in their late 30s, 40s, and 50s who
Yeah.
were like, oh, I remember this stuff. Oh, guess what? I have disposable income, or I have this, I have
Yeah.
whatever. I have like, like a crazy amount of credit on my credit card. You know what? Let me buy this $300 figure and then
Right.
let me buy the vehicle that goes with it,
Yeah.
I think Hasbro does their version of like a Kickstarter kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the last release was a 3/4 scale. Sorry, like 3 3/4 scale Razor Crest from the Mandalorian. And I
Yeah.
think it was like close to $400, And I'm like, yeah, exactly. You have to kind of hang your head about that and be like, oh, I really want this, but I don't want it that much.
Yeah. So when the last show that I worked was it New? Yeah, I guess it was New York.
Okay.
They had at I can't remember what booth it was. I don't know if it was the Hasbro booth or not, but they had the giant Unicron
Yes.
as
Yeah.
the planet and a transformed version.
Yeah.
I'd have to take out like a second mortgage to buy it.
Yeah, it's like I took so many pictures of that thing and I sent it to like a couple of buddies who are like into Transformers,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Yo, is your wife gonna let you spend like $600 on this thing?" you know, it's nuts. It's cool, but I also
Yeah.
think like I think collecting is cyclical in a weird way because I remember when I was a kid, as I had a lot of GI Joe figures, but I never had the big vehicles, but I knew the one kid that had, let's say, the aircraft carrier, right?
Oh, dude. There's
Right.
an antique mall
Mhm.
about 5 miles from here that has the USS flag, but it's like $2,500
Yeah.
and it's not even complete.
Wow.
And it was always something that I wanted, but I didn't
Mm.
even have the space for the damn thing.
Right.
But it was, it's one of those things that was very unattainable
Yeah.
back then because of its size, the price point, and I think it was a limited run because it was such a
Mhm.
large toy. And the same went for another toy set that was very elusive to the Masters of the Universe line was the Eternia playset. I only knew
Yes.
one or two people that actually had it because it was so limited.
Yeah. I like the Eternity playset was really cool because you had mini versions of everything in that playset, right?
Yeah.
So it was like a mini Gray Skull, a mini Snake Mountain, and then
And was it like Mount Doom, I think, which is what
and it had the track, right?
yeah, it had the
Okay.
monorail track that worked sometimes and
Yeah.
but looked nothing like the Eternia in the show,
Exactly.
which
But
was funny.
again, like that, I think when we were kids, you don't realize like, oh, this stuff is selling out like crazy. But again, like I feel like as a collector now, as an adult, I feel like I'm gonna definitely know somebody who's picking up that $450 Thunder Tank.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And just like, oh, can I come over and see it?
There's been times where I've been on eBay and I'm looking at like Eternia still in the box unopened, and like I'm almost ready to click buy, and I was like, no, I can't. I just can't justify that.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough, like with like the bigger stuff,
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I feel like sometimes like I'll buy two of something to kind of keep one and flip one,
Yeah,
but that's
yeah.
also like hit or miss depending on what it is. Like
Oh
I
yeah.
know, like today, as soon as we're done with this, I got the Mezco Christopher Reeve figure, which that's going to be my Sunday afternoon, that I'm going to open this thing and fly it around the house. And then,
Rad.
until my wife tells me to just like drown or something, Dude,
that's pretty rad. That's my Superman.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's my Superman too. All right. I got one more question before we
Yeah.
get out of here. Casey, what's your most favorite sandwich that you ever had?
Oh God. Because I'm missing New York so
Okay.
bad, and I just told my wife the minute tax returns come in, I'm
Uh-huh.
ordering Cats.
Oh, right on, dude.
Their pastrami sandwich, dude.
Very nice.
Yeah,
Very
Cat's
nice.
delicatessen.
The pastrami sandwich that you can make 25 other sandwiches out of.
Yes, yeah.
And
you
and
can
have
eat, you can
have
feed a
mini heart
small
attack.
village.
Yeah.
Definitely Cats is pastrami for sure.
I'm glad the salt doesn't bother you.
Yeah, if I lived in New York, it probably would, because I'd probably be spending quite a bit of time there.
It's tough not to get like your New York stuff in when you're here, like pizza, bagels, and get that pastrami sandwich.
Yeah, I'm hoping that COVID gets wiped out soon so we can get back to doing shows in other states, and I'm just itching to get back to New York. One, to hang out with you, and two, to just do more stuff that I haven't done yet.
Yeah, man. I mean, it looks like there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel, but we have Zoom and other social media platforms, which is pretty cool. So
thank
all right.
God for Zoom.
Yeah,
oh, man.
Yeah, exactly, dude. Like it's been a trip. It's been a wild 2020 in a psychological way.
Yes, it has.
All right, Casey, where can everybody find you? Give us your links if you want to be found.
Anybody wanting to find out more on the paranormal can go to OregonParanormal.com or Oregon Paranormal on Facebook. If anybody's interested in looking up our documentary, it's thepermanencefilm.com, or the Permanence, a Paranormal Case Study on Facebook. So we got a lot of behind the scenes footage. We've got a couple like different trailers up, and just a lot of photos and historical imagery from the hotel that we're filming at, which is the Old Wheeler Hotel, that is open to the public. So if anybody wants to help a local business that's local to our area, go stay at the Old Wheeler Hotel. It's a great little hotel on the Oregon coast in not a touristy area.
Very cool, man. Listen, Casey, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, dude.
I'm going to have you on again, man. That was very pleasant.
Yeah, that was fun. It's great seeing you, man.
Yeah, dude. Same here. Guys, thanks for checking out that interview. I hope you dug it. We're going to get Casey back on again soon. You can tell we're both nerds and like to talk about nerd stuff with each other. And I was blown away by the paranormal stuff that he was talking about. And I encourage you guys to follow him, check out the website. You never know, man. I'm sure you guys have ghost stories out there or hauntings that you want to talk about or are interested in. I always found the genre very fascinating, more so than the stuff you see on TV. Anyway, that's this week's show. I appreciate all you guys checking it out. Thank you again for checking it out. You can find me at BTC Rich on Twitter. You can subscribe here at BTC Rich X. That is the channel for this show, BTC 2.0, Behind the Counter 2.0. I hope to see you guys next week. Smash that like button, kiss that like button, flip that like button, do a belly flop on that like button, or drop an elbow on it. I'll see you guys soon. Later.